right, so first off, just to address this real quick, I have a new opening. You've seen it before. I'm officially switching to this opening, so now all the videos will have a shorter opening. I think that's better. Um, anyway, so I got done seeing Neighbors 2 last night or Saturday night. I don't know. It depends on when this comes up. I think this is going to go up in a little bit. But I realized I haven't actually reviewed Neighbors, which is crazy because, well, I have neighbors. So that should be some indication of whether or not I liked the movie. And yeah, I did. Neighbors was pretty good. I was surprised, actually. I just bought it. It's one of those I just went out and bought. Had no idea whether I would like it or not. Seen the trailers, thought, it seems like it's all right. But it is directed by Nicholas Stoller and stars Seth Rogen, Rose Byrne, and Zac Efron. And Dave Franco. But it's one of those pretty simple movies or what have you. You know, the plot was pretty simple. These people are living in this house, and all of a sudden, they have a kid, and all of a sudden there's a fraternity that moves in next door, and you have a bit of a rivalry that ensues, shenanigans, what have you, all over the place. So I wasn't sure. I'm not the biggest fan of Zac Efron, just in what little I've seen him in, but he did a great job in this movie as Teddy Sanders. And then Seth Rogen is basically Seth Rogen as Mac Radner, and then you have Rose Byrne as Kelly Radner. And the comedy in this was really good. I enjoyed it. For about the entire movie, there's a few points that do take me out. I think a lot of the jokes work. I think most of the jokes work. There are some slow moments though in the film, so it's not always hitting at you. And they try to do some moments where touching, stuff that like some comedies tend to do. They had to have those touching moments put in there, and they were okay. I didn't really buy into it as much, but this movie, it was a real surprise to me because the trailers didn't really sell me on it. And then seeing it and seeing that all the jokes were used in the trailer, which is always the good sign when you don't use all the jokes. It's the problem that trailers have, is showcasing all the jokes are the best jokes, and I don't think they did that here. I think there was a lot of comedy that really worked. The chemistry between all the actors was really well handled, and I think Zac Efron kind of stole the show in this movie, which surprised me immensely. So, and it's a comedy, so it's an hour and 37 minutes. It may be a little too long for my liking. Comedies need to be a little shorter. They don't have that much that they have to show you as far as story goes. The story's just kind of there to get to the funny moments. So when it goes on for too long, you do feel like it's dragging, and that's a problem with some movies. So overall, giving that a rating 1 through 10, I'm going to say it gets a 7 out of 10. It has a lot of good moments in it, for sure. It has, it has some problems too, but it was a welcome surprise, and I'm glad I just went ahead and bought it instead of guessing, instead of guessing that it was going to be good based on some reviews, instead of just, finding some way of watching it at some point. I mean, the movie was cheap when I got it anyway, so it worked out. But anyway, so moving on to Neighbors 2. Obviously, I liked the first one, so looking into the second one, I was like, yeah, I hope it's good. Comedy sequels do not have a very good track record, honestly. I mean, you got some comedies like Son of the Mask, which is a comedy, it's supposed to be, but it's horrible. Anchorman 2, Zoolander 2, Ghost Rider 2, they're just all bad comedies. So, when you get into it, and some of them are worse than others, but getting into it, like, they're just not a very good track record with comedy. So I didn't know what to expect going into this, and from the trailer, it looked like there was some more of the same. Now, movies like 22 Jump Street, I think, can pull that off, but I wasn't so sure about this one. but you have the same, director. You have the same director coming in. You've got the same returning cast, but you also have, Chloe Grace Moretz, who's coming in as one of the main leads. So that was cool. And this movie, it goes when these the two main characters, if you want to call them that, the Radners, are going to move, but their house is up for sale. It looks like it's going to be bought, but they got to wait a little while just to guarantee that that's going to happen. And then Chloe Grace Moretz, her character, moves in next door and starts their own sorority because they're kind of going against the system in a way. So that's their whole goal of it. And I can see both sides of it, but yeah, it did come across like I was leaning towards, the Radner side of things. I think they weren't asking too much. So that it didn't really sell me completely on both sides, but I did get a sense of it. Now, the comedies here, there's so many jokes left and right, and most of them hit. I'll say most of them hit. Most of them work pretty well, but there are some that they recycle, and I wish they wouldn't have from the previous one. And there's some in there that just don't land at all. But there's one of the good things about it is it's so rapid fire sometimes that you're like, as soon as you notice that one doesn't work, you have another one that does work to kind of make you forget about that. So, that's good at least. The plot goes completely out the window. I mean, it was just like the first one where you just got to go along with it. In a lot of comedies, you just got to go along with it. Here, it's the same way, because there's times where it's like, why not call the cops? And they try to explain why, and it doesn't make any sense at all. And you just kind of got to go along with the ride in that case. But I think Chloe did a great job. I've been a fan of hers in a lot of other movies I've seen, but it's not always the case. So I think she did a good job here. You have Kiersey Clemens as Beth, and Beanie Feldstein as Nora, who are like her, I guess, two best friends in this that help her try to get this up and running. And I think they did a good job too. There were some good moments with them. Rose Byrne's just kind of in the movie. So, I mean, she does a little bit, but her character just doesn't have that much going for it. Zac Efron does a great job again. Once again, he kind of steals the show, and it's weird for me to say that, but he does. He does a really good job, and his character has quite the arc to it. Seth Rogen is Seth Rogen is Seth Rogen. He doesn't really change. But, again, a lot of the jokes do work. There are some that don't, but they do try to rush through it. The plot's just there to be there, so if you really think about it, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, which is unfortunate. They have an interesting thing because the emotional core of this movie is dealing with kind of sexism in society, and that's an interesting thing for a comedy to do, but they do tackle it, and I do think they tackle it really well for the most part. I think they also try to do the flip side of that, and I would like to have seen more of that, because it felt like the movie was fully focused on one, but in doing so, they kind of shame the other, and I kind of wish they wouldn't do that in movies. I don't see why you have to kind of belittle one side to raise the other side. I don't really get that, and it's kind of irony, and I'm sure it's supposed to be that way, but it is kind of irony that the movie was established as presenting these things, but then showcasing examples that would be against what the characters are trying to do. So I don't know. I again, probably thinking way too much into this film. Dave Franco's also in this movie, and he has a few touching moments, but they're very small. He's not really in it. Forgot to mention, I think Lisa Kudrow was in the first one too. She's in the second one. She's kind of there to be there. She doesn't really serve a point. She served more of a purpose in the first one, but even then, she's just kind of there. So I'm not sure why. Selena Gomez is barely in the movie, so it's not really anything worth mentioning about her. You got Kelsey Grammer, who had a funny moment. There's I guess one of the problems I do have with this movie is there's this running gag that kind of goes, and at first, the initial thing, it was like, that's funny, but then they kept it going throughout the entire movie, involving their kid and a toy, and I don't know, didn't do anything for me. But overall, I feel like this was a good sequel, which is fantastic to say. So giving this 1 through 10, I'm gonna give it a 6.5 out of 10. It's not as good as the first one, but I think it has some really good elements to it, and it certainly was a good sequel, comparatively speaking. So anyway, that's my thoughts on it, but what did you guys think about it? Go ahead and let me know in the comments below. Hopefully you enjoyed this vid. Click that like button, share, subscribe to my channel, and watch my other vids. I do appreciate it. And until next time, peace.